Even though I was stuck light years away on Earth,
Everything changed.
Skeletor took my family, and he destroyed our world. And when you've told, quicken my shadow. I'm gonna fight him to it without you. Somebody wants to brawl.
Whatever that is.
You may have the power. But you're too.
You're from another planet. It just makes you sound a little very crazy.
What if an ordinary young man discovered he was a legendary hero destined to save an entire universe? Filled with epic battles, powerful magic, and the deadly clash between He Man and Skeletor, Masters of the Universe 2026 brings one of fantasy's greatest adventures to life. Welcome to Kako Film, where we uncover movie reviews, hidden facts, and everything you need to know about your favorite films and series. Here is the rewritten version in simple and easy wording while keeping the length detailed. Masters of the Universe is a 2026 American fantasy adventure comedy film based on Mattel's famous Masters of the Universe franchise. It is the second live action movie based on the franchise. Following the 1987 film, the movie is directed by Travis Knight and written by Chris Butler, Aaron Nee, Adam Nee, and David Callahan. The film stars Nicholas Galitzine as Prince Adam, who is also known as the powerful hero He-Man. The cast also includes Camila Mendes, Jared Leto, Alison Brie, James Purefoy, Johannes Hauker Johansson, Charlotte Riley, Kristen Wiig, Morena Baccarin, and Idris Elba in important roles. The story follows Prince Adam as he returns to his home world, Eternia. After being away for many years, Adam must finally accept his destiny and become the legendary warrior He Man. As dark forces threaten his kingdom, later it was rewritten, he must use the power of the Sword of Power to protect Eternia and stop the evil Skeletor from conquering the planet. Along the way, Adam faces dangerous enemies, discovers the true meaning of courage, and learns what it takes to become a true hero. The project had a long journey before reaching theaters. The movie was first announced in 2009 by Sony Pictures Entertainment with plans to bring the famous franchise back to the big screen. Over the years, the project went through many changes, including different writers, directors, and casting decisions. Because of these changes, the film spent many years in development before finally moving forward. In 2022, the rights to the project were transferred to Netflix. Later in 2024, Amazon MGM Studios acquired the rights and continued development of the film. With a new creative team and cast in place, production finally moved ahead. Filming took place in London, England, from January 2025 to June 2025. Large sets, visual effects, and fantasy environments were created to bring the magical world of Eternia to life. The filmmakers worked to capture the classic feel of the original franchise while introducing it to a new generation of viewers. Masters of the Universe had its world premiere at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, California on May 18th, 26. The movie was then released in the United States on June 5th, 2026 by Amazon MGM Studios. It was also released internationally through Sony Pictures Releasing International. After its release, the film received mixed reactions from critics. Some praised the action sequences, visual effects, fantasy world building, and performances of the cast, while others felt that the story and pacing could have been stronger. Despite the mixed reviews, many fans of the original franchise enjoyed seeing He Man and the world of Eternia brought back to live action. At the box office, the movie earned around $103 million worldwide. However, because the production budget was estimated to be between $170 million and $200 million, the film was considered a financial disappointment compared to expectations. Even so, the studio continues to have confidence in the franchise. A sequel is already being developed, showing that there are plans to continue the story of Prince Adam, He Man, and the ongoing battle against the forces of Skeletor in future films. Here's the rewritten version in simple and easy wording while keeping the full story and length. In Eternos, the capital city of the planet Eternia, young Prince Adam and his best friend Tila are trained in combat by Duncan, the kingdom's man at arms, and Tila's father. Their peaceful lives are suddenly shattered when the evil sorcerer Skeletor launches an attack on the city with his powerful army. During the assault, Skeletor captures Adam's parents, King Randor and Queen Malena, while Duncan is badly wounded by the dangerous mercenary Trapjaw. Realizing that Adam is the kingdom's last hope, the sorceress, guardian of the legendary Castle Grayskull, opens a magical portal and sends him to Earth, the homeworld of Queen Marlena. Before Adam leaves, she entrusts him with the magical sword of power. However, during his escape, Adam loses the sword and is separated from it. 15 years later, Adam is living a completely normal life in Oklahoma City. He works in a human resources office and shares an apartment with his close friend Hussein. Although he has grown up on Earth, Adam never stops searching for the mysterious sword he lost as a child. Eventually, he discovers it inside a comic book store and finally reclaims it. The next day, Adam is arrested after being accused of stealing the sword. While being transported by authorities, his convoy is suddenly attacked on the freeway by Beastman, one of Skeletor's most loyal followers. Just when things seem hopeless, Tila arrives to rescue him. She sensed the sword's power when Power Adam touched it and tracked him down. Together, they escape in her spacecraft and return to Eternia. Back on Eternia, they discover that Skeletor has ruled the planet for years. The once great city of Eternos lies in ruins, and the surviving warriors now live in hiding. When Adam and Tila arrive, the warriors are not impressed. Many still remember Adam as a child and feel he abandoned them. Because of old grudges and childhood memories, they dismiss him and throw both Adam and Tila into prison. Inside the prison, they reunite with Duncan, who has become bitter and spends much of his time drinking, and Roboto, a combat robot who has been reprogrammed into a servant. Together, the four escape and convince the remaining heroes of Eternia to trust them. These warriors include Fisto, Ramman, Diane, Mossman, and Mechanic soon after Skeletor's forces attack. During the battle, Trapjaw blocks their path and attempts to stop them from escaping. Facing overwhelming odds, Azam finally raises the Sword of Power and calls upon the legendary power of Grayskull. A magical transformation turns him into a mighty warrior with incredible strength and abilities. With his new power, Adam defeats Trapjaw and proves that he may truly be Eternia's champion. However, their victory is short lived. Skeletor captures many of Adam's allies and publicly executes Mossman to force the heroes into surrender. Under pressure, Fisto reveals that Adam possesses the sword of power. Skeletor then reveals a shocking truth. Adam's parents are still alive. He offers to spare them if Adam hands over the sword. Desperate to save his family, Adam, Tila, and Duncan travel to Skeletor's fortress at Snake Mountain. Inside the Dark Fortress, Adam battles through Skeletor's elite guards and eventually confronts the villain himself. During the battle, a massive cave in occurs and King Randor is critically injured. Adam is knocked unconscious and transforms back into his normal human form. He, Duncan, Tila, and Queen Marlena are then captured and imprisoned. Although Skeletor now possesses the Sword of Power, he discovers that he cannot use its magic. His trusted advisor, the sorceress Evelyn, suggests performing a special ritual at Castle Grayskull to unlock its secrets. Meanwhile, Adam and his friends manage to escape and return to Eternos. Gathering the remaining warriors, they launch one final attack against Skeletor's army. A huge battle breaks out across the kingdom. During the fighting, Duncan finally defeats Trapjaw, but Roboto sacrifices himself and is destroyed. Adam reunites with his loyal tiger companion Kringer, while Tila confronts Evelyn. Adam faces Skeletor in an epic duel. During the battle, Skeletor uses his powerful Hava staff to shatter the Sword of Power and then seriously wounds Adam. He also invades Adam's mind, forcing him to relive painful memories from his years on Earth. At his lowest moment, the sorceress appears to Adam and reveals an important truth. The real power of Grayskull was never inside the sword. The power has always been inside Adam himself. Inspired by her words, Adam finds the strength to fight back. The sword of power reforms, and Adam once again transforms into Eternia's greatest champion. Stronger than ever, he returns to the battlefield. Before continuing the fight, Adam tries to reason with Skeletor. Having learned compassion and wisdom during his years on Earth, he offers peace and a chance for redemption. Skeletor refuses, proudly declaring that he enjoys being a villain and has no desire to change. The two warriors engage in one final battle. This time, Adam completely overpowers Skeletor. Using Skeletor's own magical energy against him, Adam reflects the power of the Havoc staff back at its owner and destroys Skeletor once and for all. Meanwhile, Evelyn secretly escapes during the chaos. 6 months later, peace has returned to Eternia. Queen Marlena once again rules the kingdom, and life begins to recover. Adam and his friends welcome a rebuilt version of Roboto has been repaired and upgraded. Hussein is also brought to Eternia, finally seeing that everything Adam told him about his secret past was true. As the heroes celebrate, Tila asks Adam whether he wants a special heroic name. After thinking about it, Adam proudly chooses the name He Man. Soon afterward, a new threat appears. Adam and Cringer immediately leap into action, with Cringer transforming into the armored battle while Adam becomes He Man once again. In a final scene, the magical Trollan wizard Orko appears and shares the lesson of the story. Elsewhere, on the distant planet Etheria, Adam's long lost twin sister Princess Adora is shown leading a battle against evil forces. At the same time, Evelyn secretly enters Castle Grayskull and retrieves Skeletor's skull. As she leaves, Skeletor's sinister laughter can be heard, hinting that his story may not be over and setting up future adventures. Masters of the Universe 2026 is one of the most ambitiously assembled ensembles in recent fantasy franchise cinema. Directed by Travis Knight and written by Chris Butler, the film is the second live action adaptation of Mattel's iconic toy and cartoon franchise, arriving nearly 4 decades after the 1987 original starring Dolph Lundgren. Nicholas Galitzine stars as Prince Adam He-Man alongside Camila Mendes, Jared Leto, Alison Brie, James Purefoy, Johannes Hauker, Johannesson, Charlotte Riley, Kristen Wiig, Morena Baccarin, and Idris Elba. Below is a thorough examination of every significant casting decision in the film. Nicholas Galitzine as Prince Adam, He-Man, the casting of Nicholas Galitzine as the most powerful man in the universe represented the culminations of a search that had spanned multiple actors and more than half a decade. In March 2019, it was reported that Noah Centineo was in talks to play He-Man with Centineo, confirming a month later that he had been officially cast in the role. In April 2021, it was reported that Centineo vacated the role of He-Man. In January 2022, it was announced that Netflix had officially acquired the rights from Sony, with Kyle Allen cast as He-Man. After two previous actors had been attached and departed, Galitzine became the third performer to be associated with the role and the one who finally brought Prince Adam to the screen. Nicholas Galitzine is an English actor who moved quickly from teen and romance roles into larger studio films, making a major leap with Cinderella, Red, White and Royal Blue, and The Idea of You. He has also become known for physically demanding roles, which makes him a natural fit for a superhero style fantasy lead like He Man. In this film, he starts as a young man still disconnected from his destiny, then grows into the warrior the kingdom needs. To prepare for the role, Galitzine underwent extensive physical training and body transformation work. The physical transformation that Feat Galitzine the undertook for the role was one of the production's most visible preparation processes. He-Man is defined by his extraordinary physicality. The character is, in the most literal sense, the most powerful man in the universe, and the actor's ability to embody that physical ideal was a non-negotiable requirement. Galitzin's willingness to commit to the training regimen demonstrated the seriousness with which he approached a character who could easily have been played as a superficial action figure, but whose emotional journey from lost young man to heroic warrior demanded genuine dramatic investment. Camila Mendes, as Tila Camila Mendes, is trading one iconic animated character for another in Masters of the Universe as she leaves her role of Veronica Lodge from the CW's Riverdale behind and takes on the action packed title of Tila in the new fantasy film. Tila is He Man's sergeant and captain of the guards, as well as Duncan's adoptive daughter. In the original, Tila is also sometimes depicted as He Man's love interest. Mendes' casting brought a combination of demonstrated action capability, dramatic range, and genuine cultural representation. She has spoken frequently about her Brazilian heritage to a character whose function in the story demanded all three. Tila is not merely the love interest in the film, but a warrior in her own right, the captain of the Royal Guard whose combat skills and tactical intelligence are essential to the mission of defeating Skeletor. Mendes' ability to project physical confidence alongside emotional depth gave Tila the credibility she needed as He-Man's most trusted ally. Similar to young Adam, Masters of the Universe will also feature a young Tila, with Ire Farrell set to portray the younger version of the character. Tila's parentage will likely be of great importance to the plot. The decision to cast a young Tila alongside the adult version reflected the film's structural commitment to showing the origins of its principal characters, grounding their present day heroism in specific childhood experiences. Jared Leto as Skeletor, the casting of Jared Leto as Skeletor was one of the film's most discussed creative decisions. According to director Travis Knight, Leto proactively approached the studio and the filmmakers because he is a huge fan of the franchise and wanted a chance to swing for the fences with the character. Jared Leto is an American actor, musician, director, and producer. He first gained attention in the television drama My So Called Life before establishing himself as a major film actor through a series of transformative performances. Keldor, transformed into Skeletor, is the script and the film's central villain and the tyrant who controls Eternia through fear and force. He is written as a disfigured warlock whose obsession with power sets the entire story in motion. Leto is famous for undergoing dramatic physical transformations for roles and for fully immersing himself in characters. Leto's proactive pursuit of the role, approaching the studio rather than waiting to be offered the part, suggests a performer who recognized something specific in the character that matched his own creative ambitions. Skeletor, beneath the skull faced iconography, is a figure of genuine Shakespearean villainy, a man consumed by envy and rage, whose transformation into a walking a skeleton is the physical manifestation of his inner corruption. For an actor whose career has been defined by commitment to physical transformation and psychological extremity, the role offered precisely the canvas he needed. Idris Elba as Duncan Man at Arms in November. Idris Elba joined the cast as Man at Arms. The casting of Elba, one of the most distinguished and internationally recognized actors working today, as Duncan gave the film's mentor figure an immediate gravitas and physical authority that elevated the character beyond his toy line origins. Idris Elba's notable works include The Wire, Luther, Beasts of No Nations, Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom, Thor, and Hijack. Elba's career has been defined by characters of quiet, formidable authority, men who command respect through presence rather than volume. As Man at Arms, these qualities translated into a mentor figure whose martial expertise was inseparable from his wisdom and protective love for his adopted daughter and his loyalty to the royal family. The father daughter dynamic between Duncan and Taylor gave Elba's performance its emotional foundation, anchoring the character's warrior identity in the specific vulnerability of a parent who knows his child will face dangers he cannot protect her from. Alison Brie as Evil Lynn. Alison Brie portrays Evil Lynn, Skeletor's most powerful ally and sorceress. Brie is celebrated for her comedic work in Community, and her dramatic performance in Glow brought an unexpected casting intelligence to a character who developed the script in the original franchise had often been depicted as a one dimensional henchwoman. The decision to cast a performer known for intelligence and comedic precision in a villain would be played not as a mere for subordinate to Skeletor, but as a figure of independent ambition, whose the son alliance with the villain reflected calculation rather than mere loyalty. Bree's demonstrated ability to navigate between comedy and genuine menace, a range she had developed across her varied career, made her a compelling choice for a character whose function in the story required both qualities. Morena Baccarin as the sorceress of Castle Grayskull Deadpool's Morena Baccarin is starring as the sorceress, a powerful magic user who oversees the castle and guards its secrets. The sorceress gains her abilities from the pool of power, but she is limited to using them in the confines of the castle. Bakaran's casting brought both genre credibility and dramatic depth to the film's mystical authority figure. Her previous work in science fiction and superhero properties, Firefly, Gotham, and the Deadpool franchise had established her as a performer comfortable in fantastical contexts without ever allowing the spectacle to overwhelm the human investment she brought to her characters. The sorceress, as the guardian of Castle Grayskull and the spiritual guide who sends Adam through the portal to Earth, carries the mythological weight of the entire franchise on her shoulders, and Baccarin's composed, quietly powerful screen presence gave the character the necessary authority. James Purefoy as King Randor and Charlotte Riley as Queen Malena. King Randor is portrayed by James Purefoy, known for his roles in The Following and Rome. Sharing the ruling duties of Eternia is Queen Marlena Glenn, a human from Earth who became an intergalactic pilot and eventually became stranded on Eternia. Peaky Blinders and the Peripherals, Charlotte Riley stars in the film as Queen Marina. The pairing of Purefoy and Riley as Adam's parents brought two performers of considerable British dramatic pedigree to roles that needed to communicate both royal authority and parental warmth within limited screen time. Purefoy's work in Rome playing Mark Antony with a combination of political calculation and raw physicality, had given him specific experience in portraying power within the conventions of epic scale, historical, and fantastical drama. Riley's career, including her acclaimed work in Peaky Blinders, had established her as a performer of controlled intensity. Together, they gave the Eternian royal family a convincing quality of dynastic gravity. Johannes Hauku Johannesson as Malcolm Fisto, Vikings Valhalla star. Johannes Hauku Johannesson joins the Masters of the Universe cast as Fisto, also known as Malcolm. Fisto is the younger brother of Man at Arms and the adoptive uncle Matutila. The character is often depicted as a bearded warrior wearing purple armor, wielding a metal gauntlet on one arm and a sword in the other. The Icelandic actor's substantial it was rewritten. The Icelandic actor's substantial physical presence honed through roles in Vikings Valhalla and other Norse inflected productions made him an ideal choice for the powerfully built warrior whose massive metal fist is his defining weapon. His familial connection to Elba's man at arms gave the heroic ensemble additional interpersonal depth, and Johannesson's experience playing warriors in Viking historical dramas translated directly to the sword and sorcery register of Eternia. Kristen Wiig as Roboto. Kristen Wiig has played larger than life characters before in Wonder Woman 1984 as Cheetah and 2016's Ghostbusters reboot. In Masters of the Universe, she will star as Roboto, a creation of Man at Arms. Roboto is a machine with a cybernetically enhanced heart that allows it to feel human emotions. The casting of one of contemporary comedy's most celebrated performers as a sentient robot with a heart capable of feeling human emotions was one of the film's most unexpectedly inspired choices. Week's specific gift, her ability to find genuine emotional truth within absurd circumstances, was precisely the quality needed for a character whose entire dramatic premise is the experience of artificial consciousness discovering authentic feeling. The villains, Sam C. Wilson, Hafto Julius Bjornsson, and Kojo Ata in December. Leto was confirmed for the role of Skeletor alongside Sam C. Wilson as Trapjaw, Hafto Julius Bjornsson as Godman, and Kojo Ata as Triclops. These three performers populated Skeletor's evil warriors with physically imposing and visually distinctive figures. Bjornsson, the Icelandic strongman and actor known globally as the Mountain in Game of Thrones, brought an extraordinary physical scale to Goatman that gave the villain genuine intimidating mass. Wilson's Trapjaw and Atta's Triclops provided Skeletor's inner circle with the tactical diversity that any credible villainous organization requires. Sashia Zamata as Susie and Christian Vunipola as Hussein. Saturday Night Live. Sashia Zamata is Susie in Masters of the Universe, the human best friend of Adam who resides on Earth. Susie is a new character in the franchise's canon. The creation of Susie and Hussein as new characters, original to this adaptation rather than drawn from the existing mythology, gave the film a human emotional anchor on the Earth side of Adam's story. Zamata's natural comedic warmth and her SNL trained ability to generate genuine humor from character rather than contrivance gave Susie a quality that distinguished the Earth sequences from mere prologue. Vunipola's Hussein added a further dimension of Adam's Earth based support system. John Chuejang as Ramman. John Chuejang's casting as Ramman brought a physically distinctive presence to one of the franchise's most recognizable supporting characters. Ramman, the Eternian warrior whose helmet and battering ram fighting style make him both formidable in combat and inherently comedic, required a performer capable of balancing physical menace with the character's traditional role as one of He-Man's most loyal but often bumbling allies. Gary Martin as Beastman and Dolph Lundgren's connection ahead of the film's release. Voice actor Gary Martin was revealed to be voicing Beastman in May 2026. Martin's vocal performance gave the bestial villain a villain a distinct sonic identity that communicated the character's animalistic ferocity through sound alone. The franchise connection to Dolph Lundgren, who played He-Man in the 1987 original, was also honored, with reports confirming the original He-Man's involvement in the new production. The ensemble as they whole taken together, the casting of Masters of the Universe 2026 demonstrate a production that approached even the most fantastical toy-derived characters as opportunities for genuine dramatic investment. By the power of Grayskull and with a little help from its self-deprecating script and spirited cast, Masters of the Universe is a delightful adventure that finds humanity in He-Man. The Rotten Tomatoes consensus captured what the ensemble achieved collectively. A film that treated its fantasy mythology with genuine emotional seriousness while maintaining the self aware humor that prevented the spectacle from becoming ponderous. From Galitzine's earnest heroism to Leto's committed villainy, from Elba's weathered authority to Mendez's fierce determination, every casting decision contributed to a world that honored its toyline origins while reaching for something genuinely cinematic. Production development 17 years of fall starts the development of Masters of the Universe 2026 is one of the most protracted and turbulent in modern Hollywood history. A 17-year saga of false starts. Revolving directors, replaced stars, and migrated studio rights that saw the project pass through the hands of no fewer than six directors, three lead actors, and three different studios before finally reaching the screen. Understanding this extraordinary development history is essential to appreciating both the achievement and the compromises of the finished film. A new He Man film directed by John Woo was reportedly being developed in 2007. But despite many rumors circulating the internet regarding the film's production status and casting, the project was never officially greenlit. This earliest modern attempt to revive the franchise, attaching a legendary action director of Wu's stature, reflected the conviction among right holders that He Man remained a commercially viable property. Developed the script and later it was rewritten. Wu's departure without the project ever receiving a green light established the pattern that would define the next decade and a half of development. Genuine creative interest followed by institutional failure to commit. In September 2009, Sony Pictures Entertainment took over the rights from Warner Brothers. Pictures to produce the live action adaptation after Mattel and producer Joel Silver, who was previously involved with a potential film, couldn't agree on creative direction for the film. Sony and Escape artists Todd Black, Jason Blumenthal, and Steve Tisch were to start developing the project from scratch for Sony's Columbia Pictures. In April 2010, Sony hired screenwriters Mike Finch and Alex Litvak to draft a new script, The Director Carousel. From Stevenson to Night, what followed was one of the most remarkable sequences of director attachments and departures in recent franchise history. Warner announced that John Stevenson would direct the upcoming feature. In May 2009, it was announced that the scripting duties had been handed to Evan Doherty, with Stevenson still attached to direct. In late 2012, it was reported that John M. Chu was in talks to direct the film. In March 2013, Chu said that the film was still in early development and that it would not be campy but an origin story. In October, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Terry Rossio would scribe and the film would be set on Eternia. The report also stated that Chu would not direct the film. In January 2014, Joe Cornish, Rian Johnson, Andres Muschietti, Kirk Demico, Chris Sanders, and Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were named as frontrunners to direct the film. The following month, it was reported that directors Mike Cahill, Jeff Wadlaw, Harold Zwart, and Chris McKay were on the shortlist to direct. In April, they updated that Wadlaw would direct the film. The list of directors who were considered, approached, or attached over these years reads like a who's who of contemporary genre filmmaking. The successive departures reflected not merely scheduling conflicts, but a fundamental inability to resolve the tension between the property's commercial potential and the creative challenge of bringing a cartoon character whose defining trait was extreme physical perfection to live action cinema without descending into unintentional comedy. In August 2015, it was announced that Christopher Yost had been hired to rewrite the film. In January 2016, Deadline reported that McKay would direct the film. In April 2017, it was announced that the film would be released on December 18, 2019. At the same time, Maggie left the film and David S. Goyer had been hired to rewrite the script. In December 2017, it was reported that Goyer was now set to not only write but direct the film. Goyer's involvement represented the most creatively ambitious phase of the Sony era. In February 2018, Variety reported that Goyer had decided to step away as director to focus on other projects. Carlos Vante, a creature designer and former artist at Industrial Light and Magic, was hired by Goyer to work on the film. However, Vante said that Sony felt that Goyer's script would be too expensive to bring to life, as Goyer had intended for the movie to be on the epic scale of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The revelation that Goyer had envisioned the film at Lord of the Rings scale and that Sony had determined this vision was too expensive captures the creative tension that had frustrated the project throughout its Sony tenure. The property demanded epic treatment, but epic treatment demanded budgets that the studio was unwilling to commit to an unproven franchise. The Nee brothers and Noah Centineo in April 2018 and later it was rewritten. Variety reported that Aaron and Adam Nee would direct the film. In January 2019, Art Markham and Matt Holloway were brought in, and it was announced that they would write a new draft for the film. In March 2019, it was reported that Noah Centineo was in talks to play He Man, with Centineo confirming a month later that he had been officially cast in the role. In April 2021, it was reported that Centineo vacated the role of He Man. Centineo's 2 year tenure as He Man, from April 2019 to April 2021, represented the closest the Sony version had come to actually entering production. His departure, without a publicly stated reason, was one of the more mysterious casting exits in recent franchise history. The Netflix period and its collapse in January 2022. It was announced that Netflix had officially acquired the rights from Sony after producing the animated shows Masters of the Universe, Revelation and He Man, and the Masters of the Universe, with Kyle Allen cast as He Man. It was also revealed that the Nee brothers and David Callahan had written a new draft of the screenplay. In October 2022, Allen had stated he was working out 6 hours a day in preparation for the role. Allen's extraordinary physical preparation, 6 hours of daily training, underscored the seriousness of his commitment to a role that was defined above all else by its physical demands. But this commitment was rendered moot when the project collapsed. In July 2023, Netflix canceled the film after spending $30 million on development, citing budgetary concerns, leading Mattel to search for a new buyer and causing the Nee brothers to no longer be the directors for the film. Netflix's and Tix's expenditure of $30 on a film that was never produced is one of the more expensive development write-offs in recent streaming history. Amazon, MGM Studios, and Travis Knight in November 2023. It was revealed that Amazon MGM Studios was eyeing to purchase the film rights. In February 2024, it was announced that Travis Knight was in final talks to replace the Nee brothers and become the new director of the film, with Chris Butler hired to rewrite the screenplay. In May 2024, it was later it was rewritten. It was officially confirmed that Knight would direct the film for Amazon MGM. Knight's appointment brought a distinctive creative identity to the project. As the CEO of Laika, the stop motion animation studio behind Coraline, Kubo and the Two Strings and Missing Link, and as the director of Bumblebee 2018, Knight had demonstrated both commitment to emotionally grounded storytelling and a proven ability to bring beloved toy-based IP to the screen with genuine warmth and visual ambition. His Bumblebee had been the most critically acclaimed Transformers film by a substantial margin, and later it was rewritten. And the instinct that made it work, treating the toy property's characters as emotionally real rather than merely spectacular, was precisely the sensibility that Masters of the Universe needed. Production designer Guy Hendricks Diaz joined the project to oversee visual world building and character design. Richard Sale served as the costume designer. The screenplay 17 writers, and the final credit, the screenplay's writing credit, represents the final distillation of 17 years of creative effort. Ultimately, Butler, alongside the writing team of the Nee brothers and Callahan, received screenplay by credit, while the Nee brothers, with the writing duo of Litvak and Finch, received story by credit. Off-screen additional literary material credit went to Lindsay Beer, Will Ball, Peter Craig, David Odell, writer of the 1987 Masters of the Universe film, Rossio, Maggie, Goyer, Justin Rhodes, Yost, Jason Keller, Malcolm Holloway, Christopher Ford, Wenk, Chris Schaefer, Paul Wickner, and Wardlow. The additional literary material credit listing 17 writers is itself a document of the project's extraordinary development history. Each name on that list represents a separate creative phase, a distinct vision of what a He-Man film could be. The final screenplay by Butler, refined from the Nee brothers and Callahan's draft, was the version that reconciled these competing visions into a coherent narrative. Pre production. The casting process under Amazon MGM and Knight was remarkably swift compared to the decades of development that preceded it. A few weeks after Amazon MGM's acquisition, Nicholas Galitzine was cast as He-Man, replacing Alan. In August, Camila Mendes joined the cast of the film as Tila. In September, Alison Brie joined the cast as the antagonist Eva Lynn. Jared Leto had been offered the role of Skeletor. In November, Idris Elba joined the cast as Man at Arms. In December, Leto was confirmed for the role of Skeletor alongside Sam C. Wilson as Trapjaw, Hafthor Julius Bjornsson as Goatman, and Kojo Atta as Triclops. According to director Travis Knight, Leto proactively approached the studio and the filmmakers because he's a huge fan of the franchise and wanted a chance to swing for the fences with the character. Leto's self initiated pursuit of Skeletor, coming to the production rather than waiting to be offered the role, spoke to the genuine creative attraction the property held for certain performers. In February 2025, Morena Baccarin, Johanne Hauker Johannesson, Jamie Farfoy, Charlotte Ruiz, Zhang Sashia Zamata, and Christian Vanipola joined the cast of the film. In August 2025, it was announced that Kristen Wiig had been cast as Roboto, filming principal photography. London principal photography began on January 6, 2025, in London, with Fabian Wagner serving as the cinematographer. Wagner, whose previous credits included Game of Thrones episodes, including The Long Night and Zack Snyder's Justice League, brought substantial experience in large scale fantasy action cinematography to the production. His Game of Thrones work had demonstrated an ability to shoot both intimate character drama and massive battle sequences with equal visual conviction, precisely the dual capability that a He-Man film required. Principal photography began on January 6, 2025 in London at Sky Studios L3. Additional filming occurred at Bray Film Studios. Location filming took place around Canary Wharf, including Cabot Square and the Canary Wharf Tube Station. The London studio base gave the production access to the UK's extensive film industry infrastructure, experienced crews, multiple studio facilities, and the established vendor relationships that had been built through decades of major Hollywood productions shooting in Britain. Sky Studios, Elstree, and Brave Film Studios between them provided the stage space needed for Eternia's palace environments, Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, and the various interior settings that could not be captured on location. The the Canary Wharf location work, using the distinctive modern architecture and underground station of London's financial district, provided the earthbound sequences with the contemporary urban backdrop that could double for Adam's life in an American city. The visual contrast between the sleek glass and steel modernity of Canary Wharf and the magical medieval influenced world of Eternia that Adam returns to was itself a piece of visual storytelling that communicated the character's displacement between two radically different realities. On June 15, 2025, Galitzine confirmed on his Instagram that filming had officially wrapped. The approximately 5.5 months shoot from early January to mid June 2025 was a substantial production period that reflected the film's ambitious scope and the volume of visual effects work that would be required in post production. Post production visual effects. Post production, DNAG, and the challenge of Eternia, Tim Burke, and David Vickery serve as the film's visual effects supervisors with visual effects provided by Industrial Light and Magic, ILM Teenage, Rodeo FX, Synsight Untold Studios, and Host VFX. The distribution of visual effects work across 6 companies reflected the enormous scope of the film's digital requirements. Eternia, an entire alien planet with its own architecture, biology, physics, and light needed to be realized as a convincing physical space that audiences could inhabit for extended periods without the digital artifice becoming distracting. The various creatures of the franchise, from Battle Cat to the denizens of Snake Mountain, required full creature design and animation pipelines. The transformation sequences in which Adam becomes he man demanded a specific kind of visual effects work that combined physical performance capture with digital augmentation. And the battle sequences involving hundreds of combatants across multiple environments required crowd simulation and destruction effects at massive scale. The involvement of both ILM and DNEG, two of the world's most capable visual effects studios, gave the production access to the deepest possible technical resources. ILM's long heritage of creature work and environment creation, combined with DNEG's demonstrated capability in large scale fantasy visual effects, provided the technical foundation for the film's most ambitious sequences. Editing was handled by Paul Rubel, whose task was to shape the extensive footage into a coherent 125-minute theatrical experience. The film's tonal challenge. Balancing fantasy spectacle, buddy, comedy, humor, genuine emotional investment in the family drama, and the mythology building required to establish a potential franchise required editorial decisions that could navigate between these registers without allowing any to overwhelm the others. Music Daniel Pemberton and the score in January 2026. Daniel Pemberton was announced to serve as composer for the film. The following month, Queen guitar script Brian May revealed that he was working with Pemberton on the soundtrack. Pemberton's appointment was one of the production's most inspired creative decisions. His previous work, including Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, Enola Holmes, The Bad Guys, and King Arthur. Legend of the Sword had demonstrated a gift for scores that were simultaneously stylistically distinctive and emotionally accessible, capable of establishing a unique sonic identity for a franchise while remaining in service of the characters and story. Daniel Pemberton channels the sound of the 1980s to amazing effect with his score for Masters of the Universe with thunderously epic orchestra Brian May on electric guitar, and a killer main theme altogether, making for one of the finest soundtracks of the composer's career so far. The involvement of Brian May, Queen's legendary guitarist, whose own musical career is inseparable from the mythology of epic, genre defying rock, gave the score a sonic dimension that no other contemporary film could replicate. May's electric guitar work, integrated with Pemberton's orchestral writing, created a hybrid musical language that felt simultaneously classical in its grandeur and unmistakably rock in its energy. Skeletor vs. He-Man then echoes eerily at first, with Skeletor's moody electronics and tensely aggressive action led by pounding drums and low-pitched electric guitar until the Eternia and He-Man themes at last gain the upper hand towards the end. We then get one last Brian May treat in Return to Eternia, with the titular themes soaring once again on the impeccably played electric guitar, 80s percussion and vocals. The score's climactic moment among its most emotionally effective sequences. Pemberton then floors with final score track, A Job for He-Man. The He-Man theme plays low and peaceful at first in this lasting cue before starting to build. And then magically, amazingly, it shifts slightly, becoming a thunderously heroic and impeccably full rendition of Shuki Levy and Haim Saban's iconic theme from the animated series, with even a few fantastic He-Man vocal chants as Adam chooses his name and fully becomes He-Man in the film. The incorporation of Levy and Saban's original animated series theme was the score's most powerful piece of fan service and one of the most emotionally effective musical moments in the film. For audiences who had grown up with the 1983 animated series, hearing that theme transformed from childhood nostalgia into a full orchestral and electric guitar crescendo at the precise moment Adam accepts his destiny was designed to generate an overwhelming emotional response. And by all accounts, it succeeded. The soundtrack album and licensed in songs British rock band The Darkness released the title theme song on May 22. The soundtrack album was released digitally by Lakeshore Records on June 5th. The album features the film's original score composed by Daniel Pemberton. Also included is the original title song co-written with Pemberton and performed by The Darkness. The label has previously released the song and the score track Eternia with Brian May as digital singles last month. The 35 track album, running the full length of the film's musical content from the opening Eternia through the closing Masters of the Universe by the Darkness, gave listeners access to the complete musical experience. The score by Daniel Pemberton offers up some solid guitar steps from Queen's Brian May, and keep an ear out for a well known Queen song perfectly placed. Songs not included in the soundtrack but featured in the film include Boys Don't Cry by The Cure, What's Up by Four Non Blondes, The Man by The Killers, The Power by Snap, and Princess of the Universe by Queen. The script and later it was rewritten. The licensed song selections were specifically chosen to anchor Adams' Earth based experience in a recognizable pop cultural landscape while carrying thematic resonance. Princess, it was rewritten. Princess of the Universe by theme from Highlander, another franchise about an immortal warrior straddling two worlds, was the most tonally perfect placement, connecting the film's mythology to one of the 1980s most beloved fantasy action franchises through one of the decade's most iconic rock anthems. Release premiere and theatrical release Masters of the Universe had its premiere at the TCL Chinese Theatre on May 18, 2026, and was released by Amazon MGM Studios in the United States on June 5th, 2026. It was originally scheduled to be released theatrically in the United States on March 5, 2021 by Sony Pictures Releasing. The TCL Chinese theater premiere was an appropriate choice for a film with such deep Hollywood heritage. The most famous movie palace in the world, hosting the premiere of a franchise that had been in continuous development across three studios and 17 years. The gap between the film's original planned release date of March 2021 and its actual release of June 2026, 5 years and 3 months, encapsulates the extraordinary institutional journey the production had undergone. The June 5 release date placed the film in the early summer blockbuster window, a competitive position that required the film to establish itself quickly before the arrival of Toy Story 5 Disclosure Day and the remainder of the summer's event releases. The international distribution by Sony Pictures Releasing International. Sony, having retained the international theatrical rights despite losing the domestic distribution to Amazon MGM, gave the film access to Sony's established global distribution infrastructure. The marketing campaign was built and around the revelation of the film's visual world and its star-studded cast. The first trailer, released in early 2026, received attention for its visual ambition and its tone, positioning the film as a self-aware comedic fantasy adventure rather than the earnest epic that some of the earlier development phases had envisioned. The March 2026 full trailer expanded on this impression, establishing the buddy comedy dynamic between Adam and his allies while delivering the spectacle of Eternia's fantasy environments and the physical transformation sequences. Home medias of the current date, the film remains in its theatrical window, with home media release dates not yet announced. Given Amazon MGM's distribution model and its existing relationship with Prime Video, the film is expected to arrive on the streaming platform following the conclusion of its theatrical run, consistent with Amazon MGM's established pattern for its theatrical releases. Reception box office, the commercial performance of Masters of the Universe has been one of the most significant disappointments of the 2026 summer season. A result that, while not while not entirely surprising given the property's uncertain commercial standing, has been more severe than even cautious projections anticipated. As of June 21st, 2026, Masters of the Universe has grossed $58.1 million dollars in the United States and Canada and $44.7 million dollars in other territories for a worldwide total of $102.8 million in the United States and Canada. Microsoft the first G2 was released G2 Zwada G alongside it wide $G2 gross 2000 Z 70 in its opening weekend. Mafilda made Elephant 70 dollars on its top $10 and excluding 4 million from Thursday night previews. It debuted to an underwhelming $29.3 million, finishing second behind Scary Movie. Scary Movie easily secured the number one spot over this weekend's other major new release, Amazon MGM's Sword and Plant Adventure Masters of the Universe, which debuted at number two with a soft $29, was 3 million. 3 million in North America. The film also earned just 25 million markets for a global start of $54 million, an underwhelming start for a movie that cost nearly $200 million to produce, not including the marketing budget. The $54 million global opening against a production budget of $170 is 200 million before marketing costs was commercially devastating by any standard. The film needed to generate approximately 425 to 500 million worldwide to reach profitability. The standard rule being approximately 2.5 the production budget. And the opening weekend trajectory made that target effectively unreachable. As of June 7, Masters of the Universe has only brought in $29 million domestically and just $25 million from the 86 different countries it was released in globally for an abysmal opening weekend haul of just $54 million. The second weekend was even more alarming. Last weekend's newcomers, Paramount's horror parody Scary Movie and Amazon MGM's toy adaptation Masters of the Universe, each suffered a brutal 70% decline in their sophomore outings. A 70% second weekend drop is among the steepest decline rates for a major studio release. indicating that the opening weekend audience was not generating the positive word of mouth needed to sustain attendance across subsequent weekends. The arrival of Steven Spielberg's disclosure date in the film's third weekend, followed by the juggernaut of Toy Story 5, effectively ended any possibility of recovery. Amazon MGM Studios president Kevin Wilson stated, "This weekend represents a very solid start for Masters of the Universe and the passionate it later it was rewritten. Multi-generational audience response we are seeing around the world has been fantastic. Travis Knight and the entire cast and filmmaking team have delivered something truly special. And this opening is exactly the kind of critical first moment that validates our holistic distribution strategy, building awareness and engagement that will carry well beyond the theatrical window." The studio's reference to a holistic distribution strategy with the explicit acknowledgement that the film's commercial life would extend well beyond the theatrical window was widely interpreted as a signal that Amazon MGM was already planning the film's transition to Prime Video as the primary avenue for recouping its investment. For a streaming first company like Amazon, the theatrical release was always partly a marketing event for the eventual streaming premiere, and Wilson's statement acknowledged this reality with corporate aplomb. The competitive landscape deserves examination as context for the film's commercial difficulties. Right now, Hollywood is feeling optimistic because the domestic box office is 13% ahead of last year. What's more notable is the summer season is pacing just 3.4% behind 2019, the last pre pandemic year. The broader market health made the film's underperformance more significant. This was not a case of a weak theatrical marketplace depressing all results, but of a specific property failing to find its audience in a summer season that was performing well overall. The critical reception to Masters of the Universe has been genuinely mixed. Neither the triumph that the franchise's long suffering fans hoped for, nor the disaster that its difficult development history might have predicted. In a 2 out of 5 review, Kevin Maher of the Times stated that Masters of the Universe is a patchwork misfire that fancies itself as a new Thor, Ragnarok, Flash Gordon, or Guardians of the Galaxy without displaying a sliver of originality, and which instead frequently trips over its own widely confused gender politics. Developed the script, and Lady of the Guardian gave the film 2 out of 5 stars, stating Amazon's head scratching $200 budgeted misfire fails to explain why so much time, money, and effort has been wasted in a labored attempt to resurrect a toy IP very few people still care about. Lee's Guardian review, questioning why so much time, money, and effort has been wasted on IP that very few people still care about, articulated the most fundamental commercial challenge the film faced. The question of whether He Man as a cultural property retains sufficient audience recognition and affection to justify a $200 million investment. The answer, based on the opening weekend data, appeared to be no, or at least not at that price point. Mahar's comparison to Mahar's comparison to Thor Ragnarok, Flash Gordon, and Guardians of the Galaxy identifies the specific tonal register the film was attempting to inhabit. The self aware, comedic fantasy adventure that uses its genre's absurdities as a source of delight rather than embarrassment. The criticism that the film failed to match those precedents was a verdict on execution rather than concept. However, positive reviews were not absent. The later it was scraped by the power Grayskull, and with a little help from its self deprecating script and spirited cast, Masters of the Universe is a delightful adventure that finds the humanity in He Man. The Rotten Tomatoes consensus captured the film's genuine strengths while acknowledging its limitations. The self deprecating script and spirited cast were the qualities that positive reviewers consistently identified as the film's most successful elements. Masters of the Universe 2026 is a blast. Bright, breezy, despite a 2 hour plus running time, and brimming with heart and hijinks, the flick should go down a storm with audiences, particularly those familiar with all things He Man. This more enthusiastic assessment positioned the film as effective entertainment for its target audience. The nostalgic fans of the original franchise who were predisposed to enjoy the experience of seeing these characters rendered in live action with genuine production value. The qualification, particularly those familiar with all things He Man was telling, however. Later, it was rewritten. It suggested that the film's appeal was concentrated among the existing fan base rather than extending to the broader audience that its budget required. Prior to the film's release, director Travis Knight discussed in May 2026 how he went into the making of this film, viewing it as a standalone film with the potential to have sequels and become a franchise. Knight stated aspiration, a standalone film with franchise potential, was the standard creative framework for IP based blockbusters, but the film's commercial performance has placed the franchise question in serious doubt. Despite the announcement that a sequel is in development, the financial reality of a $200 million film grossing only $102 8 million theatrically makes continuation contingent on streaming performance and Amazon's long-term strategic assessment of the property's value. The score's critical praise, one area where critical response was overwhelmingly positive, was Daniel Pemberton's score. Overall, Daniel Pemberton's score for Masters of the Universe is pure, unabashedly 80s style fun. Daniel Pemberton channels the sound of the 1980s to amazing effect with his score for Masters of the Universe, with thunderously epic orchestra. Brian May on electric guitar and Brian T on Killer main theme, altogether making for one of the finest soundtracks of the composer's career so far. The score's critical success, earning the most consistently enthusiastic reviews of any element of the production, suggests that Pemberton and May succeeded in creating a musical identity for the franchise that transcended the film's more divisive narrative and tonal choices. Whether that musical identity has an opportunity to develop in a sequel remains one of the many open questions surrounding the franchise's future. The legacy question. Amazon's holistic strategy. The most important question surrounding Masters of the Universe's reception is not its theatrical performance, but its long term strategic value to Amazon. Unlike traditional studio releases, where theatrical gross is the primary measure of success, Amazon MGM's theatrical releases function partly as marketing investments for content that will eventually populate Prime Video's catalog. A film that underperforms theatrically but drives significant streaming engagement. New subscribers, viewing hours, sustained attention across multiple windows may be judged a success by metrics that the traditional box office analysis cannot capture. The announcement that a sequel is in development, despite the film's commercially challenging theatrical performance, suggests that Amazon's assessment of the property's value extends beyond conventional box office mathematics. Whether this assessment proves justified. Whether Masters of the Universe finds on streaming the audience it could not attract in theaters is a question that will be answered in the months and years following the film's Prime Video premiere. The film's critical and commercial reception, taken together, tells the story of a property that found its creative identity too late and at too high a cost. Travis Knight's vision, warm, self aware, visually spectacular, anchored in genuine character investment, was the right creative approach for the material. Daniel Pemberton's score gave the franchise a musical identity worthy of its mythological ambitions. The cast, led by Galizine's earnest heroism and Leto's committed villainy, delivered precisely what their roles required. But 17 years of development, three studios, six directors, three lead actors, and a $200 million budget had created institutional expectations that no version of He Man, however well crafted, could meet in a theatrical marketplace that had moved on from the IP revival model that had defined the previous decade. The question that remains the question that Amazon's holistic distribution strategy is designed to answer is whether the audience that did not come to theaters will come to their screens. For a franchise that's always lived most vibrantly in living rooms, on Saturday morning television, and in children's bedrooms filled with action figures, the transition from theatrical event to streaming content may prove to be not a retreat but a homecoming. You can almost picture it. A group of Mattel C suite executives sitting around a conference table, watching a VP gesture toward charts and graphs depicting profit margins around Barbie, Greta Gerwig's improbable 2023 masterpiece about socially imposed ideals, self empowerment, and dolls. He mentions that the key to the film's success was not just due to the tiny blonde being a recognizable property thanks to decades of prime toy store real estate. Rather, it was how that subversive mega hit managed to both question and celebrate the legacy behind the IP, walking a fine gossamer line between a wink and a soft hearted tear. In the back, a junior exec rises from his seat. That movie certainly tapped into the feelings of young women around the playthings of their youth and gave them a safe, irony filled space with which to indulge in nostalgia, he notes. But what if we could do the same thing for like Gen X dudes? The roar of approval could likely be heard from several offices down the hall. You can feel the aura of fourth quarter financial PowerPoint presentations hovering around Masters of the Universe. Martial's attempt to make multiplex lightning strike twice. And you can definitely clock the attempt at balancing sincerity and snarkiness behind the line of action figures that gave us a blonde barbarian, a skull faced villain, and a gloriously cheesy animated series beloved by Reagan era kids. Director Travis Knight was one of those tykes and has admitted he once made his own Moto movie with his dad's video camera during his formative years. That accounts for the slightly musty sentimentality around these characters. The same incision one gets when you come across a box of old toys in the attic. Still, all of the bathos in the world can't keep this would be blockbuster from being a prime example of La Cinema do bottom line. This is not a movie. This is brand management. All get the full by the power of gray school treatment. But first, some housekeeping and a good deal of backstory. Come to Eternia, the mythical home of flying dragon like creatures and swords and sorcery and spaceships. Really, all the stuff a 12-year-old science fiction fanatic loves. Young Prince Adam, Artie Wilkinson Hunt, doesn't want to be a warrior really. He'd rather draw pictures alone in his room. But regal duty calls. Like the rest of the young men and women growing up around Castle Grayskull, so named because it's both grey and resembles a skull, he's got to attend fight training with Duncan, Idris Elba, the head of the royal guard. The King James Purefoy thinks nothing of humiliating his son in front of his plebeian peers. At least Duncan's daughter and fellow cadet Tila Era Farrell takes pity on the hopeless tyke enter Skeletor played by Jared Leto, or so we're told. Honestly, it could be anybody behind that CGI skull with the glowing red eyes. So you'll have to take the credits at their word. And his quest to gain the sword of power, a sword which grants whoever wields it a lot of power. Yeah, that's what we're going with the script, and later it was rewritten. Cites the narrator regarding the weapons moniker, one of the first big signs on treating the toy line's sheer ridiculousness. It's worth noting to fans that most of their favorite characters with unintentionally hilarious, extremely literal names are present and accounted for. Man at Arms, Ram Man, Moss Man, Trapjaw, Triclops, Mechanic. There will be Fisto jokes. So many Fisto jokes. Right, sorry. Skeletor, the in house villain, makes his move. Duncan does his best to fight off the bad guys who look like they stepped straight out of the Mos Eisley cantina, but all is lost. The royal family is captured. Luckily, Adams is sent with the sword down a rainbow colored portal and ends up on Earth. He ends up Oklahoma City. The sword ends up in parts unknown. Cut to the now 20 something Adam. The idea of use hunk Nicholas Galitzine, explaining all of this wonky mythology to a date, who writes him off as a delusional pretty boy doofus. He lives with a roommate who watches the Notopocus and cries a lot. That's all he does, really, other than bust Adam's chops. So it would not surprise anyone if his character official handle was roommate who watches the notebook and cries a lot. It beats being called Ram Man, we guess. Adam runs the HR department at a local company and spends his day looking for his missing sword online, much to the dismay of his boss, former SNL MVP Sashir Zamata. Given that viewers will be subjected to a 141-minute runtime brimming with sitcom banter, and later it was rewritten. It's nice that the filmmakers actually put in a workplace comedy where said banter temporarily makes sense. Anyway, dude finds his sword. When Adam hoists it heavenward and yells out the signature line, he doesn't transform into a loincloth wearing gym rat, but the reunion of hero and weapon serves as a beacon which attracts both a monster wreaking havoc on a highway overpass and the now grown Tila, Camila Mendes. She rescues Adam and ferries him back to Eternia, a place he's been pinging for and drawing from memory since he was a kid. It's now a city in ruins. Adam will have to save his family and the imprisoned population from Skeletor, embrace his destiny as He Man, yada yada yada, for a generation that grew up whiling away afternoons with the original action figures, watching the popular Filmation animated series and its spin off, She-Ra, and thrilling, if that's the right word, to the Mondo Velvita 1987 Masters of the Universe movie starring Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella. This may seem like a return to the Eden of their youth. Everyone not immediately having their Proustian Medellin buttons pushed will simply acknowledge that the generic digital spectacle on screen is north of chintzy yet south of impressive. That to the script that later is playing Skillseater as a cross between a dinner theater Shakespearean ham and a Catskills comedian nudging you to try the fish. That Morena Baccarin is wasted playing a sorceress who occasionally turns into an eagle. That Idris Elba does what he can with a creaky redemption arc. And that having a wisecracking sidekick is one thing, but having a wisecracking romantic interest, a wisecracking bad guy, a wisecracking female villain, a handful of wisecracking supporting players, and a wisecracking robot at two, Kristen Wiig, is snark overkill. At least Alison Brie seems to be having fun as Evelyn. As for Galitzine, he's just Ken in a loincloth. Legends aren't born, crows the tagline, they're forged. For the record, however, legends usually aren't molded in plastic, mass manufactured, consumer group tested, and turned into products that are fashioned into cartoons that are adapted into quick buck live action movies that are made to sell more products as well as breakfast cereal, backpacks, and other sweatshop produced pieces of merch. Knight may have a personal stake in this IP as well as an admirable resume directed at from for a movie that can be accused of having something resembling a soul, Bumblebee, and made the closest thing that the animation studio Kileika has to a bona fide masterpiece, Kubo and the Two Strings. But it's still fan service nostalgia bait that wants you to not take it seriously while also very much taking it seriously. The sarcasm and saga methodology is being applied to something that's too thin to support it. This is not the Toy Story you're looking for. Masters of the Universe is one of 2026's biggest blockbuster films, but is it worth watching? The action superhero movie is based on the 80s toys, which spawned its own He Man animated series and even a live action movie of the same name starring Dolph Lundgren and Courtney Cox. This new version stars Nicholas Galitzine as Adam He Man, Camila Mendes as Taylor, Jared Leto as Skeletor, Alison Brie as Evelyn, and Idris Elba as Duncan. The film itself delves into what it really means to be a hero, aka, we just need confidence to be a hero in our own lives. And that power can come to the unlikeliest rewritten and the unlikeliest of people. It's a whirlwind of action, comedy, and heartfelt scenes, and it fits neatly into the US summer release schedule. Below, entertainment writers Bernice Corral and Rachel Choi delve into Nicholas Galitzine's transformation into He-Man, why Masters of the Universe is so entertaining, and who the real hero of the story is. Spoilers follow. Rachel Choi. What did you expect going in? Were you a fan of the original IP? Bernice Corral. I didn't actually know much about it aside from the memes that I've seen online. When I watched the trailer, my first thought was it reminded me of Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok, which conveniently are two of my favorite Marvel films. So I was thinking I'm gonna enjoy this RC. I never watched the cartoon. I don't always love superhero films, and I'm not actually that into Marvel. I don't hate them, just a bit indifferent. I was kind of curious about Masters of the Universe because it looked quite campy, a bit silly, goofy, but I was really entertained during it. I found it really funny, a bit stupid. They always make comments about Adam's thighs, which never got old. I wrote this one quote that Skeletor says, "Your long sword dangling between your glorious thighs." BC, he was right. RC. And everyone always goes on about his gorgeous muscles, his tan, and his loincloth. BC, I wonder if in the cartoon that's also a bit, or if they decided to bring it into the live action, but I think it's quite fun either way. RC, it's also quite deep for a superhero movie too, because everybody has daddy issues and it's all about finding your inner power. BC, the power is in you all along. I think if a kid were to go and watch it, that's a great message to come out of the movie. RC Adam, played by Nick, is a bit useless though. All the men are useless. BC real. Tila was the glue of the entire planet. RC, she's such a badass. BC, yeah, and then having to also navigate her relationship with her dad, amongst also saving everyone and being like, oh, Adam, you gotta lock in, bro. RC, come on, Adam. And she saved him from death many times. She sends him into the back of the plane and he flies the wrong way. You think, how does the hope of this planet rely on you? It's very funny though how he comes from Earth. But his room is covered with drawings of a sword. If he brings a girl home, how does he explain that? BC. And it's funny because he put all the drawings of his actual family in a box, but what he wanted on display were his sword drawings, RC. He's basically saying, it's just in case I forget what the sort of power looks like. I don't think you're gonna forget what it looks like, my guy. I think you're fine. BC. I think 5 drawings are enough. That's basically the wallpaper of your apartment. RC. Nick was a great choice though, because he could portray both an awkward and silly side, but also lock in and become a superhero. But also Loki, when he first transformed from Adam to He Man, he was basically naked. BC. The POV is abs. They could have surely used a different shot here. Rasi. My husband, when we watched the trailer, he was like, Galtizine is not big enough to be He Man. He's too small. I was like, are you seeing this? He's huge. BC. He's massive. There were so many shots of his muscles, and at one point, I was thinking one paper cut on a vein would actually draw his blood supply, RC. When he went to the gym for the first time, I was like, my guy, you're obviously already big. I think you know what you're doing. BC, I've also seen people online which make the joke about how Nick will always portray a character as a himbo. That's so true. He also did that movie with Charlie XC6, 100 Nights of Hero. And then this one. I'm like, actually, I do see that about him, even if it's not intentional. There were so many shots of his muscles. And at one point, I was thinking one paper cut on a vein would actually draw his blood supply. Bernice Coral on Nicholas Galitzine in Masters of TE Universe RC. Maybe that's his niche. Wait, imagine if he was this buff playing Prince Henry in red, white, and royal wedding BC. No, in the first movie, when he hides in that closet at this size, he wouldn't fit in their RC. He would have burst out like, oh, hey. Okay, wait, back to Adam. So, Adam also has daddy issues. He's trying to get his father's approval the whole time. That's heavy. I feel that photo courtesy of Sony BC. Yeah, in spoiler, then he kills him. That got dark RC. And then he finally got reunited with his mom. And he's like, oh, hey, mom, yeah, I saw that. I killed him, but I got his approval just before he died. So I'm good be seated. I can finally heal my childhood trauma, RC. I did love how he came from the corporate world on Earth, though, and tried to implement his strategies into war. He rallies everyone together to ideate during a war seminar. Adam, please. BC, he's talking about team building and conflict resolution. And everyone's standing there like, let's actually get to saving the planet before you die. RC, it's so good. I feel the same way when we use corporate speak in our life, but that scene was so silly and fun, especially with all the names like Fisto. Even the music they use and slow motion walking, you can't help but smile in the cinema. BC also, this is Mattel's next IP movie after Barbie, which was such a big success, RC. I wonder if we'll see more and more of these IPs because obviously existing IPs is all the rage right now because studios are just focused on making money. BC, I also think when it comes to toys, they're not reliant on following an exact storyline. You don't have to go in thinking, oh, this scene I read in the book wasn't how I imagined it on screen, RC. You have a bit more freedom, which is fun, BC. It's such easy watch even if you don't know much about it. I'm curious to see people who grew up with the cartoon what they think about it and how it compares. RC, I know somebody who grew up with the cartoon is a massive fan of He-Man and went to the preview screening. He said it was a perfect He-Man movie and he loved it. What did you think of the post-credit scene? I interpreted it so badly. BC, are they dating? Rachel Choi about He-Man and his twin sister Shira RC. I was so sure they were in love. This is his wife. Nope. His estranged sister makes way more sense. It it makes me think that it's going to be a big franchise. I hope it becomes really popular and successful because it's a different offering to the other superhero movies out there. I think those who don't love Marvel, DC, or superheroes can get on board with this one, BC. And even though we didn't grow up with it, it also felt very nostalgic of the 80s photo, courtesy of Sony RC. Yes, it's the costumes, the hair, the awkward jokes. So, overall, do you think Masters of the Universe is worth watching? BC, yes, if you want to have a good time. It's such an easy watch and you and don't need to know the backstory. Artsy, if you hate one, don't watch it. Sorry that your life is so bad. BC, don't go in if you want to watch a movie that's going to be nominated for 10 Oscars. Artsy. And you know what? A lot of times Oscar movies are very pretentious and I don't want to watch 3 hours of war. I mean, this is about war, but there's also a giant green cat and a planet called Eternia. But I'm keen for this one to continue. I hope it becomes really popular and successful because it's a different offering to the other superhero movies out there. Rachel Choi on Masters of the Universe BC. I'm excited to see if he comes back as He Man because I want to see his dynamic with Shira RC. Yeah, I'm interested to see him naked again, BC. We had arm shots, but not many thigh shots. Later, it's read despite them talking about it constantly, RC. This conversation has been edited and condensed for clarity. Masters of the Universe is now playing in theaters. Want more? Sign up for our newsletter to get the best of Refinery 29 Entertainment straight to your inbox. Related stories Camila Mendes on getting buff for latest Rolly's spicy hockey series off campus worth watching. The Devil Wears Prada 2, a groundbreaking sequel. Masters of the Universe is an adaptation that could only be made in 2026. In a different Hollywood system, the movie would be ripe for marketing toward the meathead action based market. The first attempt with Dolph Lundgren, for example, was clearly a product of the old thinking that somehow macho masculine behavior and fantasy are box office winning formulas. Filmmaker Travis Knight's adaptation has no interest in discussing tough guys. In fact, his take on Adam is gullible, overly sweet, and sometimes endearingly pathetic. The new film owes a lot to James Gunn and his vision of Guardians of the Galaxy. There is so much here that would not work if Gunn's direction of a cosmic group of defenders didn't succeed in execution. But Knight injects many fresh themes, including empathy versus violence, as well as his own brand of humor that leans intentionally into the awkward side of comedy. The new adaptation has a plethora of writers, including Kubo and the two strings writer Chris Butler. Additional writers are Aaron Nee and Adam Nee of The Lost City and Dave Callahan of Shang-Chi. What is Masters of the Universe about it? The film itself centers on the iconic character of Adam Nicholas Galitzine, the prince of the magical realm of Eternia. The themes are made evident from the start. Adam is being trained by Duncan, Idris Elba, and instead of taking the instructions seriously, he goofs off with his friend Tila. His father, King Randor James Purefoy, oversees his behavior and decides to attack his child with a real sword rather than a fake one. The king does so to remind him that weakness is not an option. And it leaves Adam feeling more insecure than confident. Before he can prove himself worthy, Eternia is attacked by the vicious army of Skeletor Jared Leto. It's in this first battle that Knight's artistic background serves him well. The audience can feel the storyboarding in each frame as the action is perfectly canvassed on the screen. For example, one of the first set pieces features a confrontation between Duncan and Trapjaw, Sam C. Wilson. The fight coverage is loose enough for the viewer to indulge in the action. The editing allows for stylish cuts to the character's weaponry, such as the mechanical attachments featured on Trapjaw, which operates like a Swiss Army knife of artillery. The resulting battle leaves Eternia in ruins, and the sorceress Marina Baccarin bends reality to send Adam and the Sword of Power into another dimension. While gliding through the dimensional wormhole, Adam loses the sword, the only key to getting back home. The script then cuts to 15 years later, where, where a grown up Adam is still rambling to women he dates and his roommate about the sword and the wonders of Eternia. The movie hand waves the question. It thus waves away the question of how Adam survived for 15 years as a stranger on Earth, but audiences will not care. The movie leans into fish out of water comedy, showing how completely baffled everyone is by Adam's sincerity about his home. Some of the execution here feels akin to the first Thor film, where Chris Hemsworth maintained the exaggerated, mighty persona in a world of less than animated earthlings. The key difference is that Thor would adapt after behaving barbarically. Besides assimilating into an office job, Adam wears his obsession with Eternia like a uniform. The casting of Nicholas Galitzine is Masters of the Universe's greatest asset. He portrays Adam with a lovable innocence that brings unexpected charm. In a sense, Galitzine approaches Adam as Tom Hanks did in the movie Big. Sure, he's a big, athletically fit man, but Adam is the same lost little boy inside. Almost every scene in the first half of the film shows Adam trying to find the bravery his father wanted him to possess. Once he understands the sword's power, his abilities give Adam the courage to face his enemies. Travis Knight's empathetic man for a moment, it seemed that Masters of the Universe was offering a supportive take on male aggression. Thankfully, the opposite is true. Once Adam finds his way back to Eternia, thanks to an older Tila Camila Mendes, he is confronted with the moral complexities of possessing magnificent strength. And while the discussion of empathy versus violence does not land perfectly, I appreciate the movie's willingness to have the discussion at all. The imperfections stem from the contradictory character choices. For instance, and later it was rewritten. For instance, Adam's moral code, he would rather talk it out than handle things physically. But the only way anything ever gets resolved is if he handles things physically. It's similar to the Batman Begin contradiction when Bruce Wayne tells Ra's al Ghul, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. Knight's movie has a breezy energy that keeps the audience invested. That said, the film does lag toward the middle after Adam gains his grayskull powers. It slows down for small character moments that recontextualize how Adam was raised, and later it was rewritten, such as a cathartic reflection between adult Adam and his father about why his father was tough on him as a child. The new Masters of the Universe movie adaptation is a bowl of sugary cereal. Most of the film's goofball charm strongly borrows from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's flowing with cosmic colors. The main character behaves like a boy child. There's a talking animal battle cat, and even Tila has Gamora's presence and outfit. Knight incorporates this inspiration and tailors it to his own use. But the similarities are quite obvious. The humor will not work for everyone because it leans into cringe comedy beats. Personally, the jokes work for me because I'm a fan of dad jokes. The type of silliness that makes one want to smash their palm through their face. For instance, characters would make a quip and pause for the laughter to come, and every so often it did not. It's the same awkward feeling viewers had watching Michael Scott from The Office. Overall, because of the unseriousness, I quite liked Masters of the Universe for its innocence and carefree charm. Developed the script and later it was rewritten. It's not perfect movie by any means and it may borrow heavily from better movies, but it's difficult to find fault in a movie that has the capacity to be shamelessly silly with its characters and action. If any adaptation was going to pull influence from Gunn, it's fitting that it would be Masters of the Universe. The tone and spectacle feel like a Saturday morning cartoon. It has the old familiar flavor of sitting down, pouring yourself a bowl of sugary Count Chocula, and letting the absurdity of a Saturday morning cartoon absorb you. What more could you ask for from this adaptation? Nearly 40 years have passed since the colossal financial failure of Canon Films' live action feature, Masters of the Universe, signaled the cultural fall off of Mattel's successful sci fi sword and sorcery media franchise, which had for 5 years held undiscriminating 80s kids like this critic in its thrall before we mostly moved on to other things. But in Mattel Media, as in Masters of the Universe, no one ever really dies. Developed script and later was rewritten. The Denizens of Castle Grayskull is in faintly undead form through sundry comics and toy line revivals, and most recently, a morass of animated Netflix content. And so, with the maybe this time mentality that colors much Hollywood studio decision making these days, we've come around to another live action Masters of the Universe feature. Bigger in all dimensions, certainly, and better if the unabashed badness of the first one isn't especially dear to your heart. Does anyone really need it though? If a He Man movie was missing from the marketplace in 2026, would you note and mourn its absence? Travis Knight's film is so loaded with jokes about its own out of time uncoolness that it occasionally seems to be apologizing for its very existence. Yeah, I know, but that's what they went with, says Flaxen Warrior Adam on identifying his signature sword of power weapon in an introductory voiceover. Adam, of course, is better remembered as He Man, though the film shies away from that lame moniker too until its closing minutes. The green screen effects are knowing in their outright fakery. The nerdiness of the whole enterprise is lampshaded with a whole set piece in a comic book store. At a certain point, this wink wink quality feels dated, but not in a way that recalls the 1980s. Instead, the e- the early Obama era quippery of the nascent Marvel Cinematic Universe comes heavily to mind. Any sense of good humored humility in this Masters of the Universe largely dissipates, however, as it sprawls toward and then way past the 2 hour mark. At 141 minutes, it assumes an event status belied by its initial air of kidding around. Night, the animator behind Laika's inspired stop motion spectacular Kubo and the Two Strings, has formed in crafting improbably engaging fare from unpromising franchise debris. His sparky live action debut, Bumblebee, remains the only Transformers film that is remotely a keeper. His liveliest instincts are finally thwarted, however, by a multi headed script credited to parties including Laika's Chris Butler, The Lost Cities Aaron and Adam Nee, and action franchise workhorse Dave Callahan that attempts at once to be earnest tribute and ironic send up. Can we really care about our hero's battle for the soul of his kingdom while we're also nodding and laughing at his dinky leather loincloth? When the film does come close to pulling off that impossible double, it's largely thanks to the man wearing said loincloth. British star Nicholas Galitzine has already proved himself a game comic performer in Bottoms and 100 Nights of Hero, undermining his jockish masculinity with hapless doofus energy. As an interplanetary warrior whose powers have been diminished by years in exile, and worse, in a dead end desk job on Earth, his deft, bewildered swapping of alpha and beta male personae carries a thin premise further than most would manage. We first encounter Adam as a delicate toe headed preteen, played by Artie Wilkinson Hunt. Prince of the idyllic planet Eternia, still overwhelmed by the combat training foisted on him by his scornful father, King Randor James Purefoy. He forms a closer bond with Chief General Duncan Idris Elba and his daughter Tila Farrell. Though he is on his own when Eternia is invaded by Skullface the villain Skeletor, a wholly digitized and very fruitily accented Jared Leto, who takes his parents captive. A sorceress, Marina Baccaran, manages to spirit him away to Earth, together with the kingdom's crucial sword of power, which he promptly loses in the cosmic flight. And this is the backstory that Adam, now a strapping Galitzine, has been telling baffled Earthlings for the last 15 odd years as he attempts to live a normal office drone life while seeking the sword that can take him back home. When it's eventually located, a signal is beamed to the now grown Tila Camila Mendes to collect him as the last hope for an Eternia all but raised under Skeletor's rule. Masters of the Universe is most enjoyable as a fish out of water tale on either side of the planetary divide, as Adam's insistence on his otherworldly origins alienates others both at the workplace and on the dating scene. Once back in Eternia, meanwhile, his corporate minded suggestion and start a dialogue cut little ice with knuckle-headed fighters named things like Ramman and Fisto. This is the year's second blockbuster after Project Hail Mary to feature a running fisting joke, and one must wonder which coming attraction will officially make it a trend. Yet once Adam is fully in command of his sword, so to speak, and subjected to a brawny He-Man makeover that at least spares him the lank ball cut of the original model, things get rather less spry. The film unhurriedly lurches from one markedly similar fight scene to the next, with only Skeletor's occasional injections of ripe innuendo to liven them up a bit. He's particularly awed by Adam's now supersized thighs, as you probably would be if you were, well, Skeletor. Either way, there's more frisson between them than there is in Adam's colorless romance with Tila. Adam's twin Shira, incidentally, is almost entirely perhaps absent from proceedings, pending a sequel that isn't an altogether welcome prospect by the time things finally wrap up here. There are flashes of wit and amusing kitsch here and there, principally in Guy Hendricks Diaz's suitably garish production design, which conjures a semblance of medieval splendor while never forgetting that this story's natural world is plastic, and in composer Daniel Pemberton's spirited revival of the fantasy metal sound that defined the franchise's original era. But it's a nostalgia trip that never quite belongs to the present and never rouses any real cherished memory of the past. The over 40s likely to recognize everything here surely don't require such an extended reminder. Everyone else might just be bemused that He Man ever had such power in the first place. Masters of the Universe has been a cult favorite since Mattel's toy line and the beloved Filmation cartoon captured imaginations in the early 1980s. After the 1987 live action film became a cult classic in its own right, later was rewritten. This latest reimagining starts fresh by taking audiences back to the beginning of Prince Adam's journey while embracing the mythology fans have cherished ever since. Travis Knight proves an inspired choice as director. His work on Kubo and the Two Strings and Bumblebee demonstrated a rare ability to handle beloved properties with a great deal of attention to detail. The screenplay, it was rewritten. The screenplay team is equally well suited, with Chris Butler's blend of humor, the Nee brothers' crowd pleasing nods to earlier iterations of the subject matter, and David Callahan's blockbuster experience all combining to solid effect. The story follows Adam Glenn, Nicholas Galitzine, who has spent the last 15 years living on Earth, far removed from the world he once called home. When the legendary Sword of Power leads him back to Eternia, Adam discovers that his home planet has fallen under the iron grip of the villainous Skeletor, Jared Leto. To reclaim his birthright, he must join forces with Captain Tila, Camila Mendes, and her father. The battle-hardened man-at-arms sees Elba Tossivat's Skeletor and his dangerous second-command Alison Brie, whose schemes threaten to plunge Eternia even deeper into darkness. This is a film that understands its audience inside out and it really shows. Rather than running from the colorful, larger than life nature of the franchise, it embraces it wholeheartedly. The fan service is delivered with affection rather than desperation. And a cameo from 1987's live action He Man, Dolph Lundgren, earns a genuinely crowd pleasing moment. A thank you to the fans who have kept Eternia alive for generations. Galitzine is absolutely brilliant in the lead role. His Adam is a lovable, scretin, slightly clueless himbo whose good nature makes him instantly endearing. And the performance never mocks the character, even when the script relies a little too heavily on comedy. When he finally transforms into him, the film finds exactly the larger than life energy it needs. Camila Mendes is terrific as Tila, bringing confidence, warmth, and real presence to the role. Her chemistry with Nicholas Galitzine gives the film some of its strongest moments. Elsewhere, Idris Elba is commanding, warm, and hilariously funny as man at arms, providing the grounded authority the story needs. For his part, Jared Leto clearly enjoys Skeletor's theatrical villainy, while Alison Brie steals several scenes as the cunning and ambitious Evelyn. The film's main weakness, shared with Thor Ragnarok, is that the humor occasionally overwhelms dramatic scenes that need room to breathe. Thankfully, the jokes land often enough, and crucially, nobody in the cast seems embarrassed to be here. That commitment matters enormously. The score deserves special praise for proudly embracing the film's 1980s roots, sweeping heroic themes and pulsing fantasy motifs that respect both the property's cult reputation and the nostalgia fans carry with them. Masters Masters of the Universe is fun, colorful, energetic, and entirely comfortable with its own identity. This is the rare franchise revival that remembers why people fell in love with it in the first place. Putting aside the nostalgia that many kids of the 1980s have for the adventures of Prince Adam, there's not a whole lot to be gained culturally from hauling out He Man flavored member berries for mass consumption in 2026. The tragedy of Masters of the Universe, directed by Travis Knight and written by Chris Butler, Aaron Nee, and Dave Callahan, is that it locates the one fertile angle that would make a movie about a blonde, buff, sword wielding barbarian interesting in 2026, only to bury its heartening Barbie style deconstruction under every terrible action comedy instinct plaguing modern blockbuster filmmaking. The film starts with a flashback to a young Adam, R.T. Wilkinson Hunt, prince of the verdant, faraway world of Eternia, playing with his friends, making them laugh, and being kind to everyone around him. His father, King Randor, James Purefoy, attempts to beat an unhealthy respect for the sword into him, to no real avail, which becomes a problem when Skeletor, Jared Leto, and his minions show up to stage a coup and steal the royal family's sword of power. Adam is thrown into a portal with the sword, losing it during the trip, and is subsequently raised on Earth. He eventually grows up into a handsome HR rep, now played by Nicholas Galitzine, an indefatigable promoter of conflict resolution through words. When he finally manages to track down the Sword of Power, Adam is whisked back to Eternia by his childhood friend Tila Camila Mendes, only to find Eternia's mightiest heroes living under abject tyranny. The only thing standing between Skeletor and total domination is whether Adam can balance the gentle emotions that are core to who he is with the violence necessary to save the world. That's the overarching tale being told by the film, and it's a great angle. But the devil is in the details. Not since the dark days of early 2000s comic book and video game adaptations has a film been so embarrassed to be itself and tried to appeal to the audience more likely to laugh at it instead of with it. There isn't a single character interaction so vital that the filmmakers don't choose to insert an awkward, stuttery, sub-Marvel quality quip. Every silly character name is clowned on, and not one office beaten cliche about workplaces goes untouched. Masters of the Universe's fight scenes, in particular, are bombastic, hard hitting, even appropriately dramatic at times. But every time the film gains momentum, cheap attempts at comedy cripple those moments at the knees. Of course, despite being a film laser targeted to the 40 somethings who were actually kids when He Man held cultural sway, the ones who got really, really mad and for the worst possible reasons. About Andy Stevenson's fantastic She-Ra revival. Masters of the Universe is ostensibly a kids' movie, and kids will likely be okay with silly jokes killing the Frank Frazetta light aura of the film at its best. That would be easier to accept if the film picked a lane and stuck to it. Is Adam a bumbling soy boy whose willingness to wanna de-escalate tensions with his enemies is going to get himself or others killed? Or is he a dangerous barbarian who can ruin a whole room of Skeletor's baddies without splitting a single blonde end of his perfect hair? The scenes where Adam is the former are too dedicated too cringy slapstick to land as a serious option, and the film is all too eager to show him as the latter, connective narrative tissue be damned. Leto Skeletor is stuck in a strange limbo between the Shakespearean tinged genocidal threat of Frank Langella's 1987 live action take on the character and Alan Oppenheimer's mustache twirling Saturday morning caricature. And Bree's evil lean vacillates between pure gothic camp and witchy, dommy mommy, bloodthirsty ambition. The consistent inability to thread the needle between comedy and drama permeates every single element of this Masters of the Universe, usually winding up landing on comedy by default. Early on, Adam describes Eternia as the heart of the galaxy and Castle Grayskull as the heart of the heart. Masters of the Universe has a beating heart, thoughtfully recontextualizing He Man as a different presentation of masculinity, and it's bolstered by a cartoon perfect representation of the original cartoon's imagery of characters and their powers. But the poorly executed, jingling key cheap elements piled up around that heart are enough to clog it until it explodes. Cast Nicholas Galitzine, thus Captain Mendes, Edgar Elba, Denjis, Jared Leto, Johannes Hauker, Johannesson, John Shue Jang, Alison Brie, Sam C. Wilson, Charlotte Riley, James Purefoy, Kristen Wiig, director, Travis Knight, screenwriter, Chris Butler, Aaron Nee, Dave Callahan distributor, Amazon MGM Studios running time 132 min rating PG-13 year 2026. If you can, please consider supporting Slant magazine. Since 2001, we've brought you uncompromising besides candid takes on the world of film, music, television, video games, theater, and more. Independently owned and operated publications like Slant have been hit hard in recent years, but we are committed to keeping our content free and accessible, meaning no paywalls or fees. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to our Patreon or making a donation. Travis Knight's Masters of the Universe is Hollywood's latest attempt to murder the 1980s and capture the decade's last gasp on camera. I recommend we all look the other way and let them, since if we don't look the other way, we'd have to look at Masters of the Universe, a live action adaptation of the crappy He Man toy commercials, pardon me. I mean, television series that doesn't do the crappy toy commercials justice. Masters of the Universe stars Nicholas Galitzine as Prince Adam. As a child, he was sent to Earth to escape the evil Skeletor, played by Jared Leto, who conquered the planet Eternia. Adam spent the last 15 years in Oklahoma City and has in no way adapted to the world around him. He still tells everyone he's from another planet and personally knows superheroes named Ram Man and Fisto. At one point, we find out Adam has a therapist who is the script and Rinsu rewritten, who is in Sigmund Freud to untangle all this symbolism. Adam can't return to Eternia until he finds a magic sword, a sword he finally finds inside a comic book shop, wielded by a superhero statue which looks suspiciously like He Man. He soon finds himself back in Eternia, transformed into a shirtless, pantless, macho Superman who fights monsters, wrestles with daddy issues, and gets very confused about the relationship between masculinity and violence. Masters of the Universe makes more sense as a lonely man's mental breakdown than a sci fi fantasy epic. The gag is that Adam is a fish out of water, an action hero who tries to diffuse every conflict before it comes to fisticuffs. He always tries to understand his enemy and extend an olive branch. It literally never works, not even once. Every problem in Masters of the Universe is solved with violence, which shouldn't be a problem for an action movie because action movies are usually comfortable with the idea that violence is entertaining. Masters of the Universe claims out loud repeatedly that violence is bad but offers no evidence to support this claim. This is a film where a guy shoves a grenade in another guy's mouth to illustrate his character development. You can't have it both ways. This is the place where perhaps a He Man fan might argue it's just a big, flashy action movie, so it doesn't need to have a message, which would be hilarious since He Man and the Masters of the Universe was literally famous for shoehorning messages into every single episode. Those messages weren't coherent either. But it's a cop out to write an incredibly sloppy screenplay of as homage. Besides, even as a big flashy action movie, Masters of the Universe falls apart. It somehow manages to look incredibly expensive and incredibly cheap at the same time. There are CG effects everywhere, but none of them look realistic or dazzling enough to compensate for their fakeness. All the locations are stock sci fi fantasy set dressings. They may as well be completely out of focus for all the atmosphere they contribute. The costumes are practical and evoke the original action figures, but this also means they are shiny and chintzy, so nothing looks lived in and nothing looks cool. The original 1987 live action Masters of the Universe movie, for all its many, many flaws, had a more exciting aesthetic. Then again, the original Masters of the Universe movie was, to the despair of every contemporary He Man fan, notoriously disrespectful of its source material. It was a pretty good Jack Kirby's New Gods movie. If you switch out He Man with Orion and Skeletor with Darkseid, but if you cared about the original characters, it was a slap in the face. On the surface, It looks like Travis Knight's adaptation cares more about the original series. But his film also makes endless apologies for everything that makes He Man memorable and calls out all the hacky flaws with an attitude of smug self awareness, which barely qualifies as humor. Oh, yes, Masters of the Universe tries to be funny. It rarely succeeds. Skeletor and his sorceress co-villain Evelyn, played by Alison Brie, are Zoolander villains who accidentally drove to the wrong soundstage. They're not as fun as that probably makes them sound. What's worse, a staggering number of the jokes, and nothing will convince me to take jokes out of the quotation marks, are just making fun of superhero names. Whoever came up with the idea that superheroes in superhero movies should make fun of each other for having superhero names probably wakes up in a cold sweat every night shrieking, "What have I done?" It's a tired gag in every context, but Masters of the Universe runs it ragged. Everyone bristles at the childish names Adam makes up for them: Ram, Man, Mechanic, Fisto, but none of them have real names. So they have no dignity to bruise. What really kills it, just strangles the premise dead, is that the villains in Masters of the Universe are really named Skeletor and Evelyn. Developed the script and later, which means people in this world already had silly names to begin with. So pretending they don't makes the film look embarrassed by its own source material. Not respectful. Not at all. There's not much to recommend about Masters of the Universe. Nicholas Galitzine is perfectly cast, although he's acting like it's in a better, more focused movie about a hero struggling with a real inner crisis. As Ritu read it as opposed to the dud he's actually in. Their Skeletor confronts Adam about his personal failings, which is enjoyably odd and hints that there may somewhere in the development phase have been a cleverer version of this script that actually tackled its themes and embraced Galitzin's version of the character instead of hypocritically contradicting itself. But I guess they decided to make this version instead. For some reason, Travis Knight's Masters of the Universe is so blah and so embarrassed of itself that it could very well be the final nail in the coffin for 1980s nostalgia. We are not scraping the bottom of the barrel anymore. We hit the bottom a while ago. Now we're just dusting off the refuse and pretending it's still fresh. It isn't. By the power of Grayskull, this movie has a powerful odor. It stinks.